them all what I'm made up. Strut down the hall, won't stop till I get enough.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're really getting into the Sean Diddy Combs case, specifically sex trafficking charges as his trial gets closer.
Yeah, and we're mainly looking at a Fox News piece today that highlights some, roadblocks. For both sides, actually.
Right, some real challenges popping up.
Yeah.
So the big question we want to explore with you is, what are these key hurdles facing the prosecution and the defense? And maybe, what do they signal about how this trial might actually unfold?
Exactly. It's about those signals, those early indicators.
Okay, so let's start with the prosecution. There's a pretty big issue right away, isn't there?
Assistant U.S. Attorney Maureen Comey mentioned they've lost contact with one of the witnesses. Victim 3. They can't locate her.
Wow, that sounds significant.
It really is. Attorney John Pearlstein, he's quoted in the article, calls this kind of disappearance potentially crippling for the prosecution.
Crippling?
Yeah, specifically for the charges that directly relate to that victim. I mean, without her testimony, proving those specific counts gets, a lot harder.
Makes sense. Did Pearlstein have any thoughts on, why this might happen?
He did suggest that sometimes people just reconsider getting involved, especially in such a high-profile situation.
The pressure, right. The media attention alone.
Exactly. That, plus maybe public reaction, the emotional toll of testifying. Judy Saunders also chimed in, saying these no-shows just add stress to any trial.
And witnesses can go quiet for all sorts of reasons, she said.
Right. It's not always straightforward.
What I found interesting, though, was Trey Lovell's take. He's an entertainment lawyer.
Oh, yeah. What did he say?
He kind of questioned why there are only 3 or 4 victim witnesses named, given, all the lawsuits and allegations going back decades.
That's a really sharp point. Why so few, formally?
Yeah.
And Lovell also stressed how crucial victim testimony usually is, even though the government will likely have other people, staff, associates, his entourage.
It's the victims themselves.
They're often the most compelling and important people on the stand, according to Lovell. Their personal accounts, they just hit differently with the jury.
Okay, let's switch gears then. The defense. They seem to be cooking up a strategy involving mutual violence.
Yeah, that one definitely raises eyebrows. It's a bold move.
What does that even mean in this context?
Well, Joanna Neves, a criminal defense lawyer, she described it as risky and complicated. Essentially, they plan to argue that the relationship with victim 1, for instance, wasn't just one-sided abuse.
So, it was volatile on both sides.
That's the angle they seem to be going for. Not simple coercion, but a messier dynamic.
But Neves pointed out a problem with that, didn't she?
She did. She said, okay, maybe it sounds plausible initially, but in court, the focus usually stays on who held the power.
Right. The money, the status, maybe threats or manipulation.
Exactly. Just because there might have been, arguments or volatility back and forth doesn't automatically cancel out coercion if one person had all the leverage.
And how might a jury react to that? That seems like the key question.
Neves warned about that, too. Jurors often get turned off by strategies that look like victim blaming.
Yeah, I can see that.
If the evidence points to Diddy being the main aggressor, trying to make the victim seem equally responsible could totally backfire.
Another expert, Eric Faddis, he put it pretty bluntly.
Oh, yeah, Faddis. What was his take?
He said a mutual combat defense just doesn't transform an allegedly non-consensual sexual encounter into a consensual one. Full stop.
Right. It doesn't just erase the core allegation.
But Faddis did add a little nuance, saying if the jury buys the mutual violence idea, it might make Diddy's alleged actions seem maybe less severe in their eyes, a mitigation thing.
It's a fine line they're trying to walk, isn't it? Introduce doubt, maybe soften the perception, but without looking like they're just blaming the victim entirely.
And this whole strategy, it feels directly aimed at that Cassie Ventura video, the one showing the physical altercation.
Oh, absolutely. You have to think that's a big part of it. Lovell explained the defense's goal is likely to box it.
Box it.
Moving. Frame it, describe it not as part of a pattern of racketeering or trafficking, but as, one really bad argument between a couple.
A couple in a long-term relationship dealing with private issues, maybe infidelity, something separate from the main charges.
Exactly. Try to isolate it.
Speaking of Cassie Ventura, we know she's expected to testify using her real name.
Right. And People magazine reported she's currently pregnant.
That adds another layer, doesn't it? How does that play in court?
It almost certainly impacts things. Lovell predicted she'll likely gain sympathy, seen as an assault survivor and also a soon-to-be mother.
Those human elements are powerful.
Very powerful. They can make a witness seem more relatable, more credible to the jury.
But the defense won't just let that stand, presumably.
No way. Lovell expects them to counter hard. Remind the jury how long ago this stuff allegedly happened. Suggest she was maybe a very different person back then.
Trying to chip away at that sympathetic image.
Right. And Lavelle also made that point about courtroom demeanor attorneys might remind the jury, subtly, that everyone's on their best behavior in court. That might not be how they acted back then.
What did the other experts say about the pregnancy specifically?
Yeah.
Pearlstein. Fatties.
Pearlstein thought it could make her seem more sympathetic, definitely.
And fattier.
Fatties went even further. He said it only increases the likelihood jurors see her that way. And crucially, he thinks it undercuts the defense's argument about mutual violence.
How so?
Because as he put it, it makes it harder to argue that Cassie, a woman modest in stature, is somehow equally involved in and responsible for the alleged physical altercations. It reinforces that power imbalance visually, perhaps.
Yeah, that makes the mutual violence climb even steeper for the defense team.
Definitely does.
Okay, let's shift focus slightly. Jury selection. There were some hiccups reported just before the weekend.
Yeah, seems like it. Opening statements were set for Monday, but the panel wasn't totally locked in by Friday's conference.
And Diddy's team was worried.
They apparently voiced concern about jurors getting cold feet over the weekend, which, interestingly, Judge Subramanian seemed to agree was a valid concern.
So is that a sign they're struggling to seat a jury?
Not necessarily, according to Joanna Neves. She suggested it's more likely a cautious and fairly common precaution, just trying to ensure a smooth start on Monday.
Trying to avoid last-minute dropouts.
Exactly. And Fatties backed that up, noting trial phases take varying amounts of time. Plus, apparently one potential juror did recently ask to be excused. So it's a real dynamic.
It just highlights how high stakes and high profile this whole thing is.
Absolutely. And it's always good to remember, what the actual charges are.
Right. This isn't minor stuff.
No. Federal indictment unsealed back in September. Racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking by force, fraud or coercion, transportation for prostitution.
The allegations are that he ran a criminal enterprise through his businesses. Bad Boy, Combs Enterprises.
And used firearms, threats of violence, coercion, and verbal, emotional, physical, and sexual abuse to, get what he wanted sexually. That's the core of the government's case.
And he maintains his innocence.
He does. But if convicted, he's facing serious time. Minimum 15 years, up to life.
The stakes couldn't be much higher.
Not really. It's a really complex situation. You've got the prosecution dealing with a missing witness, the defense rolling out this risky mutual violence play.
Plus the whole jury selection dance and the impact of Cassie Ventura's testimony, especially given her current situation.
It all points to a trial that's going to be incredibly intense and, frankly, unpredictable.
So thinking about all these hurdles, right, even before day one of testimony, it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What does this tell you, the listener, about how hard it is to actually prosecute these kinds of complex, sensitive cases?
Yeah, and how might a jury even interpret these early bumps in the road? Are there other factors, things we don't even know about yet, that could end up swaying the whole thing?
Definitely a lot to think about as this trial finally gets underway.
Sound the alarm. I'm coming up. We'll have a ball. I'm sweet like a buttercup. You're Bobby doll. Show them all